My guest today is one of my dear friends, one of my original hypnosis trainers. I spent a couple weeks learning hypnosis from him. He's brilliant. And unfortunately, at the National Guild of Hypnotists last year, I missed his talk because I'd seen him before, so I went to see other people, and I heard that his talks were mind-blowing. People said they were the best talks they've ever heard at the NGH convention. So my guest today to go over the materials that he went over in his talks and some kind of off-the-wall subjects is hypnotist Paul Ramsay. Welcome, brother.
Hi, Nicholas. Thanks for having me. It's
so good to see you. And we've spent some great time together, and I've learned so much from you. So just tell people what you do right now. I know you're a stage hypnotist. Just tell people a little bit about you.
Yeah. So quick background / bio is I was formerly educated to be a teacher, worked in student affairs at a university for a little while. And while doing that, got curious about hypnotism through direct contact I had with a retired hypnotist. That I got into hypnotism, and I've been doing that since 2004. I started out and still primarily make my living as a stage hypnotist. I tour all over the country, and I hypnotize mostly college students, but I do corporate events, all that. But I'm board certified, and I see clients as well, and I have a licensed career school, and I train hypnotists as well because I just am fascinated by all aspects of hypnotism. So kind of do it all.
Yeah, and you did the stage show last year at the NGH, which was great to see you do. He's got a really innovative process of involving the audience where they get to choose what the subjects on stage do. So that was really fun to see.
Thanks.
But you're just a brilliant guy. You can hold conversations on so many different topics. Like I'm all over the place, mixing spirituality and energy and hypnosis. And you're definitely someone that I learned from. So let's dive right in to some of the ideas that you're like excited about that are a little bit off the wall, maybe. And let's start with your myelination model.
So, all right. So the first thing I have to preface all of this with, I love talking about this stuff. If anything, you're going to have to interrupt me and tell me to shut up at points. But so what I found, this all actually connects back, excuse me, to my stage career. Because when I got into my stage career, Nicholas, I did what most stage hypnotists do is I did a pretty traditional stage show using a lot of basically the same model that everybody else was using in stage hypnotism for really the past 100 years. And I got to a point where I was like, but my bookings weren't growing at the rate that I wanted them to. So I talked with my agent, and he's like, dude, you're great at what you do, but you're basically doing what everybody else does. And you're just sort of tweaking it. He's like, you need to build something that's not like what everybody else does. And then we'll start booking you like crazy. So as you said, thank you for the kind words. I built this whole other approach to stage hypnotism. And when I did that, it was such a powerful crystallizing moment for me that then ever since then, I'm like, what other ways can I do things in hypnotism that other people don't do? So I have this kind of, it's like my reticular activating system is like trained now to look for different things that other hypnotists aren't talking about. So one of those things that I got fascinated by was I read a book called The Talent Code, and I'm sorry I don't have the author's name off the top of my head, but I highly recommend this book.
I think I read that.
And the author went around and he studied talent hotbeds. And what he found was that there were certain things that all these talent hotbeds, which seemed like they had nothing to do with each other. The female tennis school in Russia, a vocal coach operating out of a strip mall in Texas, this little hole-in-the-wall vocal coaching place. All these different things, they seem like they had nothing to do with each other. But when he talked with them all and said, why do you produce so many high-achieving performers, he found the same themes coming up and up over and over again. And so as he was learning about that, what he also did was he went and he talked with some neuroscientists. And the thing that kept coming up was this concept of myelination. That myelin, which is a fatty protein that covers the central sheath of our neurons, right? You've got your axons on one end and your dendrites on the other end, and this sort of looks like sausages all linked, like a big link of, it really does look like
visual,
that. Yeah, they look like a whole big link of sausages. And that part of it, they're coated in this substance called myelin, and it conducts electricity. So what it's really doing, another useful metaphor is think about just a standard electrical cable, right? On anything you use in your home. The rubber coating insulates the metal core so that when you grab it, you don't get shocked, and so that when it's laying on the floor, it's not sending current down and grounding into the floor. Well, that's what happens is this myelin it coats that central line where the electrical signal passes so that there isn't signal leakage and gets it where it needs to go. Well, the more you use a neural pathway, the more your brain has this beautiful built-in thing where it goes, well, we're using this, we should myelinate it even more so that the signal runs even better. And you can grow up to 50 layers of myelin. They can shave them and look at them under electron microscope like looking at a tree. When you cut a tree and you count the rings, it's like that. And so you can grow up to 50 layers, they found, of myelin. And when you're doing that, you've got this beautiful, fast signal conduction, right? And that's how skills get developed. Now, what I think of as a hypnotist, at first it was my old soccer coach hat, right? When I used to coach soccer, I think, that's teaching a kid how to properly drop a ball from the air using their chest to the ground.
Sure.
And at first when they do it, it goes flying off, but you get touch over time, and then pretty soon they can pop and they just put it right down. Or, it's how to play a C note on a clarinet with no distortion. There's everything is a skill, right? And so that's what we do as hypnotists and coaches is we help people develop their skill sets. So if you start thinking of everything as a skill and then say, how can I help myself or others create better myelinated pathways, then we can accelerate people's success in really amazing ways.
You're getting me so excited here. So this is like, but it's really like the signal taking it from a dirt road to like a nice paved highway, right? I mean, with the information, so it goes back and forth faster. And, as a wrestling coach, it would drive me crazy because I would teach kids these principles and I would watch them go out and wrestle in high pressure situations. They couldn't do it. It's because they didn't get the repetitions. Even though I had them drilling, a lot of them didn't put the focus in to get the myelination so that they could do it under pressure. And so it makes total sense. And is this Hebb's law? Is this the same thing with
I don't know.
Neurons that fire together, wire together?
Oh, fire together, wire together. Yeah, I'm so used to thinking of it that way. So it is, but it's more than that. So, it is that when you have a skill, it isn't like a single neuron is firing, right? It's an entire chain. It's a network. It's a neural pathway. And when you make them fire together, they wire together for better usage. But then it's the appropriate usage gets them to myelinate even better. So they're connected. Yeah.
Okay.
So go back to what you said, Nicholas, the wrestler analogy, right? That's the difference between what in the talent code the author calls shallow practice versus deep practice, right? And so, I can't speak in wrestler lingo because I wasn't a wrestler, right? So, but let's take something that more people can broadly understand is the simple act of shooting a free throw in basketball. Right?
John Wooden came to mind when we said,
it's fundamental. Like you can shoot 20,000 free throws to myelinate your pathway, but if you're doing it with bad form, you're myelinating a bad form pathway and you're not going to get a great result just because you shot 20,000 free throws. So it's an important distinction is we have this old cliche, right? Like practice makes perfect. No, it doesn't. Perfect practice makes perfect, but practice doesn't make perfect. So that's another important distinction when we work with our clients is we want to make sure, I think, again, there's a tendency in the hypnotism community and the coaching community for people to simply just do what you were taught, the way you understand it, without really thinking about it so much like, this is what my mentor or my trainer told me to do, so this is what I'm going to tell my client to do. I'm going to read it, say it, do it the way I was taught. I think we have to really make a bigger push in our profession for people to go beyond that and really get into deep practice, break down the component parts of everything we do and really understand why what we do works the way it does so that we can improve it in some cases when it's, it's not a perfect practice. Let's make it more perfect, right? And then the other thing is so that we can help adapt these techniques and strategies and tactics with different client issues. But you've got to have, this is what, and this, I used to, when I trained you, I always say to my students, know the mechanics. Like, don't just say, I'm just going to do the hypnotism. Like, understand hypnotism mechanically. What exactly are we doing right now? What is happening right now? And when you start to think of it that way, then you can perform at a higher level. You can accelerate success dramatically. And that's what we all want, right? We want better results faster.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and when I'm coaching someone, I make a big emphasis on their rituals, right? We are what we repeatedly do, because that's where the myelin comes in, and it just builds those pathways. And like, I don't know if you saw me smelling my peppermint oil, but every time I get into a really good state and excited for the last couple of years, I just smell peppermint, and I've linked it up. So when I smell peppermint, my neurons are firing, and that I'm strengthening the myelin around it. So it's a faster, stronger connection. And now I have the emotion I want on demand, right? Like I'm conditioning my emotions using this model.
Right.
So I love it. Okay. So now, is there anything else on myelination, or are we going to get into polyvagal here?
So actually the myelination takes us into polyvagal
theory.
Does. So that's great. So the other thing I'm fascinated with, and I think the myelination is very cool and important for us to look at more, the polyvagal theory is even more important. I think polyvagal theory could be the most important thing that the hypnotism profession and the coaching profession can adapt to and include, that we should be inclusive of. I think there's probably nothing right now more important for us to be inclusive of than a mainstream understanding of polyvagal theory.
Can I cut you off for a second?
Huh?
I want to leave that as an open loop, but I just had something. We get people excited. We'll come back to it. Now they're stuck. They can't go anywhere. With myelination, mirror neurons, if I'm watching you do something at a high level, do my mirror neurons start to take effect, and I can myelinate my brain by watching you do that action?
So you're going to get some, but that's where, again, potentially you're leaving yourself reliant on shallow practices. Sure. You can't assume that what you see, you truly understand. Like some of what we see, we do. We can pick it apart and we can mirror it very quickly. But let's say breathing. Breathing's a great example, right? Like whether you want to be an opera singer or a great athlete, there's so many ways in which you have to have a greater understanding of breathing. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to really get into deep practice issues around breathing just by watching people breathe. You're going to pick up some of it if you're really, really paying attention. But what you really need to do is have deep practice involves really ripping things apart, basically deconstructing and then figuring out the component parts and then reconstructing, right? Yes. So it means that if you want to be a great singer, you need to find, and you know this from everything we've talked about, modeling, right? You need to find your person you want to model, this great singer, and you need to talk with them and have extensive conversations about how they breathe in all the different situations. When they're pushing, when they're sustaining, when they're trying to do things that are beyond their range a little bit, all these different scenarios. How are you breathing here? How are you breathing here? You can't just say, I want to know how to breathe like a singer. There's not just one way, right? And so it's like that for everything. Is you've got to really get into the deep, and then practice it enough so that it's automatic.
Yeah, so and then automatic. Yeah. You don't even have to. You don't have time to think about it, right?
Right. So you've got to put in that work, understanding it. Then once you have the deep practice, repeating the proper practice and getting it to a point where it's not eating up all your working memory and you're doing it without having to think about it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. So we may be able to get some myelination, some neurons firing together from watching others, but it's not going to take us to that level of deep practice and mastery like those repetitions.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So let's get into polyvagal theory. Tell me about it, Paul.
Stephen Porges, it's sort of his life's work. He wrote the polyvagal theory, and in polyvagal theory, what it all centers around is the 10th cranial nerve. 10th cranial nerve comes out of the brainstem, runs down along your carotid artery, down around your heart, across your diaphragm, and it branches out, and it goes all the way down into your gut. It is the single longest nerve pathway in the human body, and it actually has two branches. It has a dorsal branch and a ventral branch. And one branch, I don't want to say right now because sometimes I confuse them in my head, but one of the branches is basically from the diaphragm up, and the other branch is from the diaphragm down. And one of the branches is myelinated, but the other one is not. And that has a really that's important for us. So the myelinated portion is the upper portion.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is you can train yourself to have better control of your upper portion, which would be heart rate and breathing, right? So there's our fight or flight stuff. We can learn to use techniques to control our fight or flight response and get better response, better control over our heart rate and our breathing so that we manage our fight or flight response. Your lower portion, your gut, mostly your gut portion, it is not myelinated, which means you can still do things that affect it, but you can't train it in a way that's going to myelinate it and give it a much better response. So what you learn to do on the lower portion stuff is that's afferent. So it's collecting information. And so what you do is you learn how to pay attention to the way your body feels and understand that when your gut is becoming upset, it says something. That's a form of communication. Mm-hmm. And then you get afferent stimulus in the upper half as well, but you get more efferent stuff where you can send a signal out, not just have signal received. Does that make sense?
It does. So my 5 senses, I might see, perceive, smell, hear something that triggers an alarm would it start in my gut and then it would trigger the rest of my...
Totally depends on what it is. Totally depends on what it is. But the key thing is to understand that about 80% of your vagal pathway, about 80% of it is non-myelinated. And only like 20% of it is myelinated. So most of what it's really doing is it's a big communication network. It's taking stimuli from all these different areas of your body and bringing it back so that then you have a response and you know what to do. It's all part of a fight or flight. And really, this is what we always do. I'm doing it right now, and even though I know better, we say fight or flight, but it's not fight or flight, Nicholas. It's fight, flight, or freeze.
Freeze, yep, absolutely.
Right? And so what Porges, when he started out, he was studying why some babies who have totally healthy gestation periods, mama has a normal, healthy pregnancy, great delivery, and then like after they're born, they would just die. And no one could figure out why. And so he started trying to tackle that and figure out what was going on. And then he discovered that somehow it was connected to vagal stimulation. And then his career went on. He started working with trauma survivors and found same thing, right? That when people have this really strong stimulation of the vagal pathway, they basically, you have a hierarchical system. All right. Mm-hmm. So now we'll get even geekier. So you have your top level of, and this is why he calls it polyvagal theory, is that there's 3 vagal systems within what we think of as the vagal system. The first level is a social system. It actually is handed down through your DNA, these instincts that we never have to learn. They're automatic across the species, and they're about how human beings convey a sense of safety or danger through facial expression. So something happens, again, outside of you, you perceive what happens, and immediately, lightning fast, you assess whether you're safe or not, and then you convey it through your affect, right? So when people feel super, super threatened, they get what's called flat affect. They don't look so you think about this, how intense, like we all know, like you can look afraid, and that's usually not a good thing. It's actually even worse when you look like nothing. When you're just flat affect, you're starting to get to that freeze place of freezing so that nothing is displayed. And so that's your first thing, is the social component of polyvagal theory, is how the signals being sent actually get communicated. And this has huge, huge repercussions for what we're looking at now in terms of the amount of anxiety that is being reported across our culture, the insanely high levels of loneliness that are being reported across our culture. And one of the things that Porges' theory would seem to suggest is, because we're spending so much time looking at devices, mm-hmm. we're not spending enough time. This is where technology has outpaced our own DNA. We're not spending enough time during the day looking at each other. And so we're not getting that social cue quota that we need to feel safe. And so Porges even talks about how it comes down to little things that we would totally take for granted. Like he talks about the importance of play, of like when you're playing, we take for granted that when you watch animals or children, when they play, they're constantly checking each other's faces, right? And that's where, in like roughhousing, right?
To see if they went too far or not, right?
Yeah, it's like, are we good, Nick? We're good, right?
We're
like,
still good? All right, we're back on. Yeah.
We just keep checking, right? And then if someone takes it too far, there's a response like, hey, what the heck, dude? And then that's oh, my bad. We're cool. Like there's all this communication happening non-verbally that triggers heart rate and threat response stuff, right? So down to like, so play used to be our primary form of exercise, right? And nowadays, what do people do? They go to a gym and they get on a treadmill or an elliptical, right? And they're doing that all by themselves. Mm-hmm. They're not looking at another person. So you're actually potentially, not always, but potentially, you're activating your fight or flight. Because if you're fleeing, what are you doing? You're running without looking at anyone. You just want to get away.
Wow.
And so you could be bad hacking your own polyvagal system by getting on a treadmill and running hard for 20 minutes.
And think we don't want the person next to us talking to us. We're trying to work out, right? Like,
right, and that's
we're like, I got my headphones in, leave me alone. I'm doing my workout. Fantastic. And something, a couple things that came up for me is blind people have the same facial expressions and they've never seen someone else's face, right? Because that's part of this system, right?
Yeah, it's in your DNA.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I want to ask you about, because I teach this, is that if you're stressed, your face, you hold tension in your face looks a certain way. But if you force yourself to smile, does that then send a signal back into that first level of the system to make you feel relaxed and happy?
Yeah. This is, again, it's all, right? We can reverse engineer everything. We can reverse hack everything. So getting yourself to smile, the biggest thing, the coolest thing I thought is, he talked about the importance of singing. We all take for granted, like how powerful, like go back, I don't know how many thousand years, there's all these examples of cultures have always been chanting, right? And singing. And so what happens is when you just sit in your car, even if you've had a rough day and you just hum, what you're doing is in order to hum, it's called vagal braking. It's like you by restricting your breath in a steady way, you can't do what you were talking earlier, right? When you can't, this triggers, danger, right?
Absolutely.
Shallow breathing. Well, when you're, anything, there's this consistent breath release, right?
Yeah.
And it's vagal braking. It's like putting the brakes on the vagal signaling. And so just to have time every day where you sing could be like this huge thing for your health and your well-being that we all take for granted.
Beautiful. And dancing too, right? Moving your body, moving the whole body. Okay. So that's the first level, is the social. What's the second level?
Second level is, it's the, I can't remember the name now. I got so excited about this, but it's where you get into the breathing. It's the real, we can't just communicate through facial stuff. So now we're more reliant on a more kind of primordial, right? Like a more basic, heart lungs response.
Sure.
Is if I'm really threatened, my heart rate's going to change, my breathing's going to get faster, my breathing's going to get more shallow. And that's my second way of saying, okay, I can't determine from social cues what I should be doing with my body. So now that in itself is going to make me feel like perhaps there's a threat. And so I'm going to start just changing my inner workings, and I'm going to have a change in that way. So again, for that stuff, that's where when we notice that, we come back to meditation, chanting, purposeful breath control, all that kind of stuff as a way to hack that system and go, no, we're okay. We're okay.
Yeah. So I noticed, like, when I think usually before we go into fight or flight, we hit freeze, right? If you ever walk up on a rabbit, they freeze. And then they're assessing the situation. Do I want to fight or flight? And so what they do, like if you've ever played hide and seek, what do? You hold your breath as somebody's walking by your hiding spot. And so I've noticed throughout the day, like I'll be sitting there working on something, like totally holding my breath. And I'm like, no wonder I'm stressed out, because I'm just sitting here like holding my breath, telling my whole system that I'm getting ready for fight or flight.
Right. And so then that's the initial, there's the initial freeze for assessment purposes.
Yes.
And then this lightning fast automatic system, again, we were born with it. We didn't have to learn it, is, can I fight it off? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, let's go. No, I better get out of here then. But then there is an assessment in some people of, can I outrun this thing? Mm-hmm. Can I get away from it? And then if no is the answer, then we go back to freeze again. And that's the classic stereotypical stories you hear of people laying down in the fetal position, of animals defecating and losing their bowels. And there are humans that have done that too, humans with serious PTSD issues. And so that is, again, that's the third system. That's the gut-based, like, it's time to shut down system and give the impression that I am not a threat to you at all because I'm dead or dying. And so that's the like really bad freeze system that we go into as the third lowest, most basic system.
I'm just picturing in Gladiator when he's getting ready to walk out in the Coliseum, and Russell Crowe looks at the guy in front of him and he looks down and he sees the guy's peeing down his leg.
Himself,
and
yeah.
That was the stage that this guy was in, right?
Yeah, because and that's a great example of that guy knows he probably can't beat whoever he's going to come up against. He can't outfight it. He can't leave, so he can't flee, right? And so he gets to that third level of like, I'm just losing it.
Can we hack our way out of that, or is that just so automatic that at that point you're like, eh?
Well, I don't know. I think the more important thing I think about with that, Nicholas, is I'm really fascinated by how we can assess whether people have created a strange cultural activation of that state that they're not aware of on a daily basis. Like when you think about it, we don't live in a world, most of us, we're very lucky. Some people in the world still do, but most of us here in the United States and Western culture don't live in a world where on a daily basis, we're getting that third freeze level triggered that bad, right? And yet, if you really look at a lot of the personal development stuff that people are dealing with in our culture, they're frozen every day of their lives. So it's like we've created a cultural equivalent of that old world threat system in which people feel trapped, by modern circumstances that are very serious and threatening, by domestic abuse, by drug and alcohol abuse, by economic, disadvantage, and scarcity of various forms. And that these things in this world that we live in today can impact people in that same way physiologically as if they came across a bear in a cave, but meanwhile they live in a condo.
or even like going to ask your boss for a raise or going to talk to the girl in the bar, right? Like right. We can get so nervous that we just shut down.
Right. Yeah. It's I think it's something that we really need to start. Look, I think I'm such a huge fan of Dr. Porges's work, and I think we need to really start looking. The other one too, Nicholas, is my weight loss project I'm working on, the fat hypnotist and everything. And when I was looking at some of his deeper stuff, I came across an interview which he said something I had never heard before. He said there's a link between part of your top level, your social, right? All the facial stuff includes a relief signal sent by eating food. And I thought, like how many people that struggle with their weight, we've always talked about people eat unnecessarily when they're bored or when they're stressed. Yeah. But what if you even hone down and say, what if there are people who are getting this true fight or flight energy kicking off, and the reason they keep eating when they don't need to is because he said literally the movement of the jaw and the facial muscles relaxes and dissipates that signle. And I was like, so how many people are out there that are victims of abuse or trauma of various forms that are just overeating because it's the easiest way they've discovered without being consciously aware of it of dissipating the polyvagal signal.
Yeah, and it's like you're telling your body like, well, I wouldn't be eating if I was really in trouble.
Right? I wouldn't be eating if I was really threatened. Yeah. And yet you're not aware of it at all consciously.
Yeah.
I need to find more about that, but
that's fascinating. All right. So give us like, if we're a hypnotist, we got to practice. Like, what are some of the practical ways that we can start to apply this stuff? to help our clients?
So I think the first one is, you got to do your work on this stuff so you understand it better. But then once you do have a better understanding, the easy themes that come up, right, are real common sense type stuff, right? First of all, we always can help people increase their awareness. And because a lot of this stuff is happening, again, it's in our DNA, it's coded in neurologically, and it fires without us even having to think about it. It just happens. So if we can increase people's ability to be aware of it, then they can catch it. And instead of going, I just feel bad right now, they can say, why do I feel bad right now? Well, I guess it could be because I was having this thought, and that may have triggered my vagal response. And so now what do I do about that? And just that puts people in a position of empowerment to then say, I can do something about it because now I understand why it's happening. So, and then when you get to but what do you do about it? Again, we know the research is clear at this point. Exercise has tremendous benefits, but what we tend to do more than ever is we go and we exercise alone. Stop exercising alone. Find a walking partner, a workout buddy, and make sure that you find ways in which you don't just go into your inner world during your workout and zone completely out. Return to what you are still hardwired for, which is exercise being a form of play. Right. And so if that means walking or hiking and having a conversation, and you don't even have to converse really technically. You just have to look at people and keep being reminded we're safe. We're okay. We're safe. Yeah. We're okay. We're good. So, but if it does mean instead of going and getting on the treadmill for 30 minutes, you go to the park and you join an ultimate Frisbee league, do it, find ways to reconnect with other human beings. That is the single greatest challenge of our age right now is we have to help each other feel connected and loved again. And until we all start practicing that on a regular basis, all of these problems are just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah. And at their core, people just want to be loved and accepted. That's what we all just want. And so I think that I'm really good with people. I've studied this stuff. I know body language, but I'm at home alone. I work out by myself. You know what I mean? So I don't even get that, even though I'm an expert in it, teaching it, but you still got to be around the people. And I need to do a better job of that as well. But so that's a great reminder. And then I think, there's always an opportunity as hypnotists, we're basically helping people a lot of times to mentally rehearse things. Right. And so we can build in the myelination, at least in the upper part of the vagal system, we can build in the myelination through just mental rehearsal. Make somebody feel good going out to give that public speech, or make somebody feel good going to do that athletic performance. Visualize it in your head enough times, doing it perfectly. Right? It's almost more important to visualize yourself because you can practice perfect in your mind before you do it in real life. Right?
Yeah, so that's the deep practice, finding ways to increase your amount of deep practice. And deep practice can happen as a mental exercise. You just have to know what the deep practice actually is, right?
Yeah,
so if we go all the way back to the free throw example, it's not enough to just imagine yourself standing at the free throw line and shooting a free throw and it goes in. Imagine getting your feet set just the way they ought to be, having your hips and your knees properly set, holding the ball properly. There's a certain way to hold the ball. When you bring the ball up, what's the elbow position, the hand position? What are you looking at? Are you looking at the front of the rim, the back of the rim? All of those component parts, and practicing all of it properly mentally. And Beautiful. You can do that. You do that same thing with anything as long as you have all the right component parts there.
So I think as a hypnotist, that's something to keep in mind is when we're taking people through things, to have them to help understand the component parts and to help them visualize or move through that in their mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. All right. So anything else on polyvagal theory, or you want to dive into the gamma stuff?
There's a lot more about polyvagal, but I still have a lot of learning to do. So I'll tell you what, let's stop it there for today, and we'll do another follow-up after I present on it in August at the convention, because I'm going to do a lot more research between now and then we can have a part 2.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm excited about that. So Paul, let's get into, you said you were really excited about this, was talking about gamma waves and the future of that.
Yeah. So it's a very similar thing to polyvagal theory. you know, several years ago, this has been a real back burner thing for me, that because I've, you know, we all have a lot of projects going on, and I'm like, man, I need to spend more time on this. And so I'm trying to, you know, bring it up and not just let it sit on the back burner. But I read Happiness by Matthew Ricard, you know, probably like 4 years ago. And that book, Matthew Ricard grew up in Europe and was formerly educated to be an engineer, and started his engineering career. And then as he was at that point in his life, he also got into Buddhism and meditation, and eventually ended up walking away from a lucrative career as an engineer and moved to Tibet, and has lived in Tibet ever since as a Buddhist monk. And he is kind of, I think he has like sort of like the honorary title of the world's happiest man. And he got this title after, as you know, the Dalai Lama has been very, very supportive over the years of bringing in scientists and cooperating and partnering to find where spirituality and science dovetail and where they can really be of benefit to one another. And so as part of those efforts, Matthew volunteered to be part of a project where, while the monks were meditating, they put an EEG cap on their skull and measured the brain waves. And when he meditates, he creates levels of gamma waves in the brain that are way, way more powerful and prevalent than novice or even, you know, average meditators. And so the scientists were blown away at his ability to create gamma waves in his brain. And so they started really paying attention with him and asking him to do repeated studies and stuff. And so, you know, again, in our world, you and I, folks in the hypnotism community, personal coaching, personal development are pretty, you know, you always end up checking in on some neuroscience. And so what you hear over and over again is that there are these primary wave sets. So there's beta waves, alpha waves, theta waves, and delta waves. That's the four that you hear about the most. Beta waves would be like what you and I are in right now, kind of like normal consciousness. And they're about memory, a little bit of memory interaction and idea processing and cognitive processing. Alpha waves, when you start to get into more like using your imagination, mild dissociation, things like that. When we go into light hypnosis, people start having more alpha waves in their brain. When people go into deep hypnosis, they get into theta waves. And also when you have REM sleep, there's a lot more theta waves in the brain. And then when people are in deep restorative sleep, those are primarily delta waves.
Correct.
And so so you hear about these wave sets over and over and over again. And then finally, when I read the Ricard book, I heard about this idea of gamma waves. And I was like, what do you mean gamma waves? There's this fifth set of waves. And technically, there are even some other ones that are lesser known, that again, like, because they're lesser known because people didn't understand them for a long time. So they left them alone, basically. And that's what happened with gamma. Was they found these waves, but they didn't know what they did. So for a long time, they just ignored them in research. And now they're paying more attention to them, right? So gamma waves, so your beta waves are like 20 waves per second down to like 14. It's like 14 to 20, like some maybe 22. And then your alpha is like from 14 down to like 9. And then your theta is from like 8 down to like 4 or 3, and then delta is like 3, right? So the whole first 4 sets is just a 20 wave span, really, right? You go from 0 to 20 or 22. Gamma waves goes from, it's either 20 or 22 all the way to 100. And you go, right? Then just right off, I go, wait a minute. like how, what is that? I don't even know. You know, it's like, but you can't help but start wondering. You go, what's going on? You have all these other brain activity wave sets that we use every day, only comprise like the first 20 waves of frequency. Like they're all clustered in this, 20 wave area. But then this other one goes from 20 all the way to 100. Now, I guess most of the time it goes from 20 to like 45.
Sure.
Most of the time it's like 20 to 45, but they have been measured as high as 100 apparently. And so the coolest thing that all of this is, a lot, forgive me for all my,
No, this is great.
The coolest thing about it all to me was that what I read was when they asked Matthew Ricard what he does to create this gamma state when he meditates, he said most commonly what he does is as he sits and meditates, he imagines himself like a radio transmitter beaming out a signal of love to all of humanity. Like that's the one focal point he said he most commonly uses, is that he just sits and imagines transmitting love to the rest of humanity. And that when he does that, he gets this big escalation in his brainwave stuff. And that just blew me away, that to just have one single compassionate thought like that could take him to a whole other level of brain function that many people aren't capable of producing.
Well, I mean, love is the answer. Love underlies everything. And this is what I teach with my antenna theory, right? Is like we affect our cellular vibration with our thoughts and our intentions. And there's nothing that's like as pure as love and gratitude. So if you can meditate on that and really like your focus changes the energy in you and changes the energy around you and what you transmit. And so by focusing on that, he's changing his brain waves, he's changing his cellular vibration, and he's tuning into that amazing state that probably just makes him feel like untouchable, right? Undisturbed, like nothing can affect you.
Yeah. So I think that's, again, bring that back. You go, all right, so the monks have really known this for, over 1,000 years. Yeah. But how could the rest of us leverage this and make good use of it, right? So you think, so if we just started practicing self-hypnosis and or meditation and actively replicating this, how would the world become a better place? Like, if we can get people to actively, on a regular basis, cultivate gamma waves, how would it change people's internal chemistry, people's internal thought processes and habits, all of these things that could really, truly improve quality of life for billions of people.
So here's my question. When we go into self-hypnosis, we go from beta to theta, but you're saying when we go into gamma waves, we go back up the spectrum even higher, right?
So this is another thing that I was a little embarrassed when I finally figured it out. I am a very literal and concrete processor, right, Nicholas? So what I thought for a long time was that your brain was almost like a transmission in a car, and that somehow you were literally shifting to the wave as a gear. Like I'm in alpha right now. I'm in theta right now. That's not how. They're all happening all the time. So when you put an EEG on, and I have the Muse headset, right? And I have a third-party app that's called Muse Monitor. Now they call it's changed it, I guess, a Mind Monitor. And it plots out your waves in real time. And you don't just see like, oh, now there's an alpha. Oh, it's switched. Now you see all of them, alpha, beta, alpha, theta, delta, and gamma. All 5. I got 5 different colored lines moving and crossing over all the time.
Okay.
It's about which signal is getting stronger and more prevalent and which ones are reducing and happening less. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So it's, and the cleaner.
It's a big fireworks show. That's what it really is,
So the clearer the signal, right? Like the more you tap into the gamma, the more the other waves kind of fade away, right?
Right. So there, again, a lot more learning there for me in terms of how to look at those scans and figure out what they really mean. And I found that the Muse company has a forum online where users can go and talk with each other about that stuff. And so I'm started to plug into that, and I'm trying to get some people. What happens is seems to be a pretty big divide between the normal everyday guys like me and the guys who write code and really get into brain stuff. And they're almost like, I don't want to have time to explain to you, little brain. I'm like, come on, someone tell me.
How's your practice been with that? Have you had much success in tapping into the gamma?
No, well, see, so Muse is set up to be consumer friendly. So their app doesn't show you waves at all. And so whenever I just practice for the sake of practicing, I don't know what I'm getting out of it other than they rate it as is your brain active, neutral, or calm? And they're trying to get you to get better at calming your brain. Now,
Sure.
the third-party app, the Mind Monitor app, that one shows it, but it shows it in real time. So like you're sitting there with your eyes closed. You can't look at it. You can't.
It doesn't record it?
It does record, but when it records, it doesn't record it like a video where you can go back and watch it. It records the data and then pumps it out as like a data list of just numbers, which then you have to learn how to put into a system and extrapolate the numbers. And I'm like, dude, I'm smart, but I don't know if
So I don't know if you've heard of 40 Years of Zen. It's a retreat where they put you in a machine similar to this, but in real time, they give you like beeps. So if you're going into like more beta waves, you'd have beep, 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 beep. And then if you slow your brain down, like the beeps would start to go away. So you could really master that with feedback. But it doesn't sound like they've mastered that yet.
That's what the Muse app does is they give you birds.
Okay.
They give you a noise. You can choose whether you want it to be wind or rain, right? And when you're busier, the noise of the rain or the wind, whatever you select, gets louder.
Gotcha.
And as you calm down, it gets quieter. And then when you really get calm, you hear this gentle chirping of birds. And the app actually tracks how many times the birds chirp, so you have a measurable outcome. I got 30 chirps today, 50 chirps today, 103 chirps today. So it's similar to what you're saying there. But again, they don't connect any of it to an exact brain state. They just say, that's you being more calm.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, it's
okay.
tricky. Yeah.
So, I mean, what can we take away? The future of humanity lies in accessing more of these love-based emotions because we resonate with different actions, with different ideas. We relate to people differently. I mean, it all comes back to our emotional state, right?
Yeah, I think my goal is always to be practical, right? And so I think like I like geeking out about the science and stuff, but I don't like getting so into the science that I lose how does it help people every day? And so I think it comes back to, again, if we can develop practices, and it's one of those things where like we're, not to go down the rabbit hole too much, but like we're in this culture where we care more about test scores and how we rank in math against India, than like the mental well-being and the mental health of our children, And so I think that's one of those things. If we want to make a real practical change, like kids should be learning to meditate when they're in grade school, and people should be learning self-hypnosis and learn these self-management tools as a way of staying in better touch with yourself and of learning how to be able to calm yourself and not rely on, having to just swallow a handful of pills. And I think we have to keep working on those kind of things. And so the beauty of it that I see is that it is that simple. It's about feeling loved and feeling connected. It's not about having big, lofty philosophical debates about, it's just, how do we practice helping other human beings feel loved and connected every day? That's it.
That's it. Like we, and I'm guilty of this too. I complicate it so much with language patterns and body language hacks and all this crazy stuff. And then like, I've been doing this self kind of gratitude practice this last week as a focus. And like, when I get this feeling of gratitude in my heart, like none of that other stuff matters. Like I know what to do. I know what to say. I know how to treat people. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's it is to like, but you got to feel it in the whole body has to resonate with this love and gratitude.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Nicholas, and you might've saw my Facebook post about this recently, but I had the biggest thing for me was sitting at my dad's bedside when we thought he was going to pass, and for folks who watch this, my dad didn't pass. So it's, you don't have to be sad or anything, but my dad's been fighting cancer for 13 years and he got to a point where his cancer got really bad a few weeks ago. And he was so sick that we were all convinced that it was his time. And so I still don't know how to really explain the experience I had, but I had this really singularly amazing experience where I sat next to my dad in the hospital, and I was going every day, but I had this one day in particular where we thought, all right, today's the day. And I sat with him and I just really detached from all of the old ways I used to think about my dad and just got into like, right now, I'm just going to be with my dad and I'm just going to love him. That's all I'm going to think about. Because if he goes right now, I want him to go being loved. And that's all I'm going to focus on. And it was like, again, see, I don't know how to, that's the best I can explain it, but it was incredible. And when it got done, you know, so we ended up not going, and then he got better. Now he's home. He's still sick, but he's home. But ever since that day, I find there's been this incredible residual effect of putting myself in that vibrational place.
Yes.
Where, you know, like, I'm not afraid of some things I used to be afraid of. And I've really shifted. Like, what I came to realize, I kept reflecting on it. I was like, wow, that was a crazy experience to have. That was an amazing experience to have. And I kept thinking about it day after day afterward. And I realized that what had really happened was I had shed a bunch of beliefs about what was important, you know, and I realized I came to a new understanding of what's really important. And it really is, it's just loving people. That's all that matters, you know, like houses and cars and titles and certificates and people telling you how great you are and brilliant you are, as much as I do love it when you say I'm brilliant, but like all that, you know, like, I'm like, none of that stuff matters. It just doesn't matter. Like, all that matters is loving people and trying to help people get through this round on Earth School, you know, feeling loved. And that's it.
It's beautiful. So well said. I mean, you know, we can get into the neuroscience and how we evolved and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, like, I think to evolve from kind of our, like our limbic animal brain up into our neocortex and the higher levels of ourself, I think love moves us through that spectrum, you know, and being present with people. And I think that's the key to it all. And I think I've pretty much figured out the meaning of life.
I tell you, it's funny. I said to someone about a week ago, I said, you know, I was talking about the same thing. And I said, you know, it sounds weird to say it, but what I've come away from it is I was like, I sort of wish that every person could sit next to their dying parent and have that moment. Because some people don't get a chance to do that, right? They lose their parents suddenly, or some they do get to do it, but they're so trapped in the fear all the way to the end that they don't get to have that moment. And I was like, I wish I could give that moment itself to every human being on the planet, because while I have a lot of things I still need to learn and a lot of things I need to figure out, that moment was like so pure and cannot be spoiled in any way that I'm like, everyone should get to have that. It's kind of a weird thing to wish for people, but
I think the great spiritual teachers have taken that moment and made a life out of it, with the stranger at the grocery store and the sick and dying person on the street who's a stranger, and the prostitute on the corner, you know, like to have that moment of such presence and love with every person you come in contact with. Anyway.
So that's the thing, right? Is I'm like, can I hold it and keep doing it?
How can I?
You know,
how can I?
Yeah.
Change the question. How can I keep holding on to this? But that's it. Just like go in with an intention of love and being present, and it'll grow. You'll strengthen it. You'll myelinate it.
Yeah. Right.
That's the whole goal, right? The deep practice and loving the person in front of you. And I don't know if you saw that. We'll wrap it up here in a second, but I put a post the other day that said, what did it say? It said something about, I asked a great spiritual teacher his secret to meditation. And he said to open your eyes and love the person in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that's it. So
that's it, man.
All right. Well, Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope I get to see you before NGH, but I don't know if I will.
Well, we'll do it. We'll make it happen. You want to, let's have set something up and bring people together, and I'll come out and do something with you.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll figure something out. But it's been a pleasure having you on. This has been great and educational for me. So thanks again. Anything else you want to share? And where can people find you, and what projects are you working on right now?
Gosh, good question. So I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on TikTok. If there's any TikTokers, that's mostly from my entertainment side of things. But I'm on Facebook and Instagram. My weight loss project is thefathypnotist.com. That's still puttering along. We're working on it. If you want to learn more about hypnotism training, besthypnosistraining.com is the website for that. And that pretty much covers it.
Excellent. And maybe a simple entry would be your self-hypnosis course, right?
Yeah. So we teach a 4-week course on self-hypnosis, and for people who want to learn how to hypnotize others, we now offer a 4-week course on heterohypnosis, we call it beginning hypnotism, how to hypnotize other people.
And it's great. I mean, I've done, obviously learned a ton from you, been to a couple of your trainings, so it's been great. And as always, my pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Thanks, buddy. I love you.
Love you too.